Africa Business News, proudly sponsored by EY.
Up on Africa Business News, doing business in Nigeria, the World Bank releases its report. Zimbabwe's plan on becoming more attractive to investors. And Nairobi Securities Exchange takes a steep downturn. Stay tuned.
Africa, it is huge, it is diverse, and its business landscape fascinating and dynamic. And that's our business here on your favorite weekly African business stop. We're joined by Bonnie Tunya in Nairobi, Wole Famurewa in Lagos, and we'll hear from Christine Mundwa here in Johannesburg. My name is Victor Kgomoeswana, and this is the Africa Business News. I'm still fascinated by the African stock markets. This time, Tanzanians are stepping up their efforts to attract more IPOs, lifting the cap on foreign ownership on the Dar es Salaam Stock Exchange.
That's right, Victor. Restrictions were removed on foreigners owning more than 60% of the companies that trade in the Dar es Salaam Stock Exchange. And it was reported that investors from the East African community are now able to buy up to 40% of the Tanzanian government securities. Now, the Tanzanian share, Victor, the index was gained up to 73% in 2014 alone. And on the Nairobi Securities Exchange, which took a steep downturn as counters that chalked up double-digit gains in the past few weeks, shedded value on profit-taking. Now, the Nairobi Securities Exchange has been on the rise, with the NSE 20 share index surging 5,404 points on Monday, and the first time it has reached that point since September of 2008.
One country that does not seem to have any preference or bias with regards to trade relations, Ethiopia, doing very well in attracting Turkish investors as well. I believe there is over $3 billion in question.
Sure thing, Wole. I'm sure Ethiopians are still overwhelmed after the Ethiopian Airlines won the Passenger Choice Award for Best Airline in Africa for the second time at the Airline Passenger Experience Cargo held in California 2 weeks ago. But what are the chances, I ask you, Bonnie, of Ethiopia joining the East African community anytime soon? That would certainly boost the population of the region by what, more than 80 million people, and make it a serious contender, I think, for the Hub of Africa title.
Well, Victor, there is no telling when Ethiopia could join this union. But of course, it joining the union has serious implications looking at its population and its economic ability. But of course, we must laud the kind of advancement they've made, especially in its aviation industry, Victor.
Asante sana Bonnie out of Nairobi. We check into Southern Africa now, where we talk to Christine Mundwa, and he's about to take us through some of the headlines out of the region. The petrol price going down this week in South Africa. Well, not a major drop, but a relief already to the stressed out motorists, with a producer price inflation still above 7%. Christine, what is your biggest story of the week?
Well, cement producer PPC, which has a presence in 7 African countries, including Zimbabwe and Botswana, and has huge Africa expansion plans, is making the headlines this week. And it's not particularly a story about growth this time, but more about shareholder activism. Just to put it all in summary for you, we know that about 2 weeks ago, the chief executive of the company resigned after he wanted to fire one of the executives, and the board would not allow him to do so. He since wants to be reinstated, something the board refuses to do. So he's taking this to the shareholders and effectively asking the shareholders to overrule the board and have him reinstated. Part of his reasons are the fact that he believes that he is central to a lot of the company's pending deals with other African countries. But we know that the company's biggest shareholder, which is the Public Investment Corporation, that's South Africa's government employee pension fund manager, is not backing him and is rather backing the board and not reinstating him. So it's going to be interesting to see what the developments are, and certainly if he is reinstated by the shareholders, it's going to make corporate history in South Africa.
Well, we know PPC is also a huge player on the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange, huge investor in that country. There's more investment inflows into Zimbabwe that you have to tell us about, this time from the PTA Bank, or the COMESA Bank, as others would like to call it.
That is it. So the PTA Bank is injecting a further $200 million investment into the country. This takes their trade finance investments into the country to about $500 million. And interesting enough, this $500 million actually represents 20% of the bank's funding to member countries. So one of the things is, of course, interest rates. We know that the country's, Zimbabwe's Minister of Finance and Economic Development has been saying that interest rates need to be lower. So we know that they are looking for places like development institutions where the interest rates are lower. This will allow, of course, Zimbabwean business to be more competitive, in other words.
Well, Namibia is not the fourth or fifth largest producer of uranium in the world for nothing, and it is about to get an even larger slice of the uranium mining pie with what? Rio Tinto joining other multinationals, Christine, to make an investment in that country?
Well, that is it. We know that at the moment, Namibia is, I think, ranked about 4th in the world in terms of uranium production. There's one particular mine there, that's the Tango mine. We know that an Australian company called Bannerman Resources owns about 80% of that mine. Well, Bannerman Resources has contracted people to actually build and operate a plant in there for uranium production. Now, much like other uranium deposits in the world, we know that it's still very much uneconomical at this point. We know that ever since the Fukushima crisis in Japan, uranium prices haven't quite recovered. But this is interesting developments because we believe, or the market is expecting, that there is undersupply and that what we're seeing in Russia, all that tension there, is going to cause for more demand.
Certainly. Thank you very much, Christine. It's time now to check into West Africa and talk to Wole Famurewa. Yesterday, the World Bank published a report on doing business in Nigeria. What are the key insights highlighted in that report?
Well, the World Bank's Doing Business in Nigeria report 2014, with a focus on states, compared business regulations in 35 states and Abuja, the Federal Capital Territory. It focused on the federal and state regulations that affect small to medium-sized companies and how they impact starting a business, dealing with construction permits, registering property, and enforcing contracts. This year's report recorded 34 improvements, of which 13 focused on starting a business, 8 on dealing with construction permits, 10 on registering property, and 3 on enforcing contracts. The states of Cross River, Ekiti, Niger, Ogun, and Rivers made the biggest strides towards the national frontier of good practices, but despite improvements, challenges persist. For example, no single state ranks at the top in all the areas measured. And it will interest you to note that the northern Nigerian state of Katsina remains the easiest place to enforce a contract within Nigeria. Resolving a standard commercial dispute takes about 314 days and 41 procedures and costs 26% of the claim value. It may not sound great, but it's certainly the best you can get in Nigeria.
Well, Wole, we spoke not too long ago about trade between Nigeria, India, and that was soaring, but China is reporting even higher growth in its bilateral trade with Nigeria. Is it the same old export resource to China and import finished goods, or is Africa's largest economy likely to change the age-old trend?
Well, it's pretty much the same. We are seeing so much exports out of Nigeria, and it's really oil that is going to China. And of course, on the flip side, a lot of finished goods coming from China. So China is definitely a major trading partner for Nigeria, like the Consul General of the People's Republic of China noted recently. He did highlight that $11.7 billion is what was traded between China and Nigeria in the first 6 months of this year. That's over double what was traded the entire period last year. So clearly that trade flow is increasing between China and Nigeria. I think he also noted, and I think it's very important to make this point, that Nigeria is now the biggest export market for China in Africa and the third largest partner in Africa.
Not surprising, of course, considering the size of the population of Nigeria and its economy. But Wole, out of Ghana, we heard recently how their banks performed exceptionally well in the past year, and the city, which is the Ghanaian currency, is recovering from depreciation it suffered in the first 8 months of the year. However, the economic odds remain stacked against Ghana right now, or at least if we go by what the IMF is saying. Tell us about that.
Right, absolutely. The International Monetary Fund has called for a more ambitious and front-loaded fiscal consolidation in Ghana to help place public debt on a sustainable path and to allow monetary policy to be more effective in bringing down inflation. Of course, we know that Ghana has really struggled recently, and this followed the IMF's latest mission to Ghana, which ended last week. As you may know, Ghana is seeking IMF support to stabilize its economy. The IMF delegation said that the government must strictly limit budget deficits financing by the Bank of Ghana.
Well, it sounds like the second time around with the Bretton Woods Institute and Ghana on that one, Wale. But back in Nigeria, President Goodluck Jonathan approving tax waivers and incentives. To whom does this apply, and what was the intention behind the move?
Well, this is something that has been in the works for 2 years. The federal government is set to implement tax waivers and incentives approved by President Goodluck Jonathan to boost capital market activities. These reforms were actually approved in 2012. Jonathan, through the coordinating minister for the economy, Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, had announced forbearance for some stockbroking firms and abolished stamp duties and VAT payments on secondary market transactions as part of efforts to revive the capital market, which of course was struggling at the time.
I have $10,000 I want to invest on the stock markets. Which stock are you going to encourage me to buy this week, Wale and Bonnie out in East Africa, and why? Who goes first on this one?
Wale goes first.
All right, I'll go first. Bonnie, if you, Victor, and I thought you should do more than $10,000, but if it was $10,000, I would put my money right now. It may sound a bit controversial. Forte Oil, many people talking about that stock's price already stretched given the performance. But then, of course, recently we are hearing about the ambition of the management of that company to make some fresh investment in the downstream sector. Now, if we see oil prices continue to come down, I think that could be an interesting place to be. Margins are very thin in that business right now, but could improve if we see the deregulation, the final deregulation of petroleum prices in Nigeria.
Well, oil is going to be a big player in Nigeria. What about you, Bonnie, in East Africa? The NSE, the listed Nairobi Stock Exchange on the Nairobi Stock Exchange, is obviously not the darling of the investors this week. What is your choice and why?
Well, I would definitely not go for the NSC share. I would go for Equity Bank's share. Victor, Wale, you've seen the news all week long, the tussle between Safaricom and Equity over the rollout of the MVNO. The average for Equity this month was 53.50, the highest it has risen in about 12 months. And Equity's subsidiary got an approval from the Communications Authority of Kenya to roll out this particular plan. And with 9 million subscribers already in the bag, definitely it is a money maker.
Well, it sounds like Equity Bank is going to be the star performer this year. But before we wrap again, we do our trivia. Gentlemen, September 30th is the National Day of which African country?
That's a bit tricky. It has to be West Africa. I don't know, but it has to be West Africa.
Well, the question seems to have stumped our two reporters, gentlemen there in East and West Africa. We're talking about a top diamond producer in the world, still ranked highly in the World Bank's Ease of Doing Business report and the Corruption Perception Index by Transparency International. Botswana is the country we're talking about, celebrating the gaining of independence from Britain in 1966. Let us also not forget that many African countries are celebrating Eid al-Adha, or the Festival of Sacrifice, this week. Nigeria also celebrates its independence on October 1st from 1960, Guinea-Conakry on October 2nd, the day it gained independence from France in 1958, as well as Lesotho, the Mountain Kingdom, which gained independence from Britain in the same year as Botswana, but on October 4th. And on September 30th, though, we wish all of Botswana a happy Botswana Day. That brings us to the end of the show this week. Bonnie Tunya in Nairobi, Wale Famurewa in Lagos, and earlier Christine Mundo in Johannesburg gave us her insight. Stay tuned to CNBC Africa. We're back with you next week with more Africa business news. And Wale out of Lagos tells me I should say until next week, Ka Omesia. Cheers.